Hey everyone, it's Michelle, and I'm finally coming to you here today with some of my mindfulness tips and tricks. I have been promising this video on sensory systems and regulation or self-regulation, but I had to really take some time to think about how to best introduce this to you responsibly. So, sensory processing disorders exist, and oftentimes sensory processing is a component of a number of diagnosable conditions. And those of us who are in various fields of healthcare have to go through courses, study this intensely, practice it, demonstrate the ability to safely practice those skills in order to do it with individuals. And I really, as I was thinking about how to best present this, I want to make sure that I do this responsibly. Because one, if you think that you truly have like a very heightened sensory processing system, whether you're extremely seeking or extremely avoiding, I do recommend that you go and seek a healthcare professional versus listening to the information and suggestions and tips in this video. Remember, although I am a healthcare provider, I am not your healthcare provider, and I always suggest that if you think that there is something a little bit deeper that you might need to look into, go see your physician, get a referral for OT. There are a number of therapists who also practice in this area, and just be safe and make wise choices. Information that I'm presenting today is not a recommendation for anybody's health or wellness journey. These are just tips and tricks that I personally have done to help regulate my own system, knowing one, that I have been diagnosed with ADHD, and two, as a healthcare provider who has gone through a number of courses and testing and who was able to demonstrate safe and effective practices of these techniques in the healthcare field. Okay, now that that's aside, I realized that for me, especially during the time that I was working in inpatient drug rehab, where I was doing sensory modulation with adults who were in active addiction. And as I was working with them, I realized that I was also getting a benefit from a lot of these things that I was doing, because it's so much about setting up like a routine, practicing things, a lot of self-awareness, figuring out what was needed in order to bring them to a nice neutral level to be able to do hard work, whether it was cognitive thinking work or emotional work that came from their other therapy sessions that they were receiving in the inpatient house where I was working. So I'm going to just give you a brief outline of what our sensory systems are, the information that they interpret, and I'm going to suggest some tools for you to go and research so you can put together your own sensory profile. Again, I recommend anybody who is trying to work on their own mindfulness or to work on just managing their own stress. I always think of stress as truly something that it is real, but it's also, for me, triggered by an imbalance between my logical and emotional centers. And so I use my sensory processing tools and profile to help me to be able to come back to a neutral position between those two processing centers to make better decisions and to not feel so overwhelmed by the stress or the stimulus that I am being exposed to. Okay, so we actually, when we talk about sensory systems, everybody knows there's like the five, but the truth is there are actually 8 sensory systems. Of course, we all know there's your visual sensory system. That is the information that is taken in through your eyes and processed in your brain. We have our auditory or hearing sensory system, right? We have our tactile, so touching, anywhere that you have touch receptors. Of course, we know that your extremities, like your toes and your hands, are the most sensitive, but you do also have other tactile receptors throughout your body and along your skin and your surface. But your most sensitive areas are the ones that a lot of people often think about or that they're most sensitive to, right? Then we have gustatory, which is your taste, the way that you interpret taste and smell are strongly related. So that is the next one. Olfactory, which is our sense of smell and our interpretation of the smells that we encounter in our environment. So those are the 5 that everybody thinks about, right? Visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, olfactory. But you also have additional sensory systems. So next we have vestibular, which actually is located within your inner ear and is related to your balance or spatial orientation. So somebody who has like, recurrent ear infections or ear pain or balance issues, or people who, for instance, who have vertigo, are individuals who have issues with their vestibular systems. After vestibular, we have our proprioceptive systems. Proprioception has to do with your position in space or your position in relation to other parts of your body and your movement. Coordination. A lot of times people think about proprioception as like their coordination, but there is actually a little bit more to it than that. And then last but not least, the one that very few people talk about is interoception. And interoception is your awareness about your internal conditions and sensations happening within your body. So those are the 8 sensory systems. I think a lot of times when people first hear about sensory systems, we think about the top 5 and things beyond that we kind of think are like these like hokey, made up things, but they're actually not. Each sensory system has specialized receptors throughout your body, whether on the surface or internally, that send messages to your brain. Your brain receives those messages, processes those messages, and then creates a response to those messages, right? So when we think about the sensory system, there are actually 4 steps to sensory integration or sensory responses. So the first step is reception, and that is where those specialized sensory receptors detect the stimulus. The second step is transduction. Transduction happens when your system converts that external stimuli into a nerve impulse. The third step is transmission. Transmission is where the neural pathways carry that message from the original external stimulus to your brain. The fourth step and final step is processing, and that's where your brain receives the message, processes it, and then creates that response to your system. So a light lesson for everybody today. What I would suggest that you do, because again, I don't want to make recommendations that are not applicable because you are not my patients, right? What I would definitely do is first start and consider that in order to utilize sensory processing for self-regulation, in order to move away from dysregulation, right, where you're either having hyperactive responses to stimuli or you're having hypo, meaning little to no reaction to sensory stimuli. First, what I would do is grab your pen and paper and go through each of those 8 processing systems. And first consider, am I sensitive to these things, or are these things that I seek out actively? And next to each category, I would write that, sensitive or seeking, sensitive, seeking, as you go through the list, right? So then you go back to each category. So for instance, if you find that you're very sensitive to visual stimuli, write down some of the things that you're really sensitive to. If you're a person who seeks visual stimuli, like I do, write down the things and the ways that you seek the visual stimuli. Okay? And do that for all of the sensory systems that are there. Then go back to Google and look up some activities or some things that you can do for each of those specific sensory systems. Write down things to do when you need to calm yourself, and write down things that you can do to heighten what we call your level of awareness or heighten your level of excitement, right? So for instance, I'll give you some examples. Okay, so for myself, I am a visual seeker. I have told you that I am an artist, and a lot of that is because I love, for me especially, I love spatial and perspective drawings, so high contrast drawings, but I also love vibrant colors. So those are things that I'll put there when I'll put on my list for things that I'm seeking or things that I use to like heighten my level of awareness. Things that I would put on my sensory profile for when I'm trying to calm myself will be things that have lower contrast and fewer colors. So for me, for instance, when I'm trying to go to sleep at night, having low visual input is extremely important for me. I can't sleep with lights on. I can't have a TV on. I have to have like a dimmed alarm clock because the visual stimuli is exciting to me. My system is sensitive to it, but in a way that I'm seeking it. So if I have a lot of visual input, I get very aroused, right? And that's great in the morning, but not so good at night. My next one, auditory. I'm actually very sensitive to auditory input or certain types of auditory input. I do not like high-pitched noises or high frequencies. And, some of the things that I avoid, for instance, I had a coworker and I loved her because she was a mentor, she was a teacher, but she had a laugh that was so high-pitched, my ears would literally start ringing and I would feel like I was going to throw up, right? It was very nauseating to me. I also find that there's certain instruments that I don't like to hear. Like, I'm not really a big fan of flutes. I'm not a big fan of the violin. It makes beautiful noise in conjunction with other instruments, but not by itself. When I think about auditory inputs that I like things with bass. I like music that vibrates my body, that vibrates the room. I like more mellow, deeper sounds. I played the guitar. I played the cello. That was beautiful. I like the deep end of the piano. And that type of music, that slower cadence with more rhythmic, deeper melodies is what I look for. So when I'm trying to relax or trying to get into a mindset where I can balance out, I listen to that type of music, right? On that deeper, quieter, calmer, slower end of the spectrum. When I'm trying to get heightened up or I'm trying to get more excited and have more energy to be able to do other things, I'll go to that higher frequency that is a little bit irritating to my system, but is also arousing. Tactile. Now, my tactile system is interesting to me at times because you have deep touch and you have light touch, right? I lean more towards deep touch. I am that person who loves to sleep like a mummy, wrapped up in my blankets. And I only like light touch to certain parts of my body, right? In certain other places, it's just very irritating. So that's something that at my big, almost 38 years, I'm still working to desensitize certain areas of my body. And there's reasons for that, right? There's always reasons for that. But also, I played a lot of contact sports. I like to box. I like to do heavy work. And those are all indications that I like that deeper touch. But there's always a time and a place when you really need to be able to practice lighter touch, right? I remember having my kids and thinking it was so interesting, like I had to learn how to slow down and be softer and be lighter because I was just used to like hard and fast and heavy. And I can just keep going and telling you all the different things that I do, but I would definitely recommend create your own sensory profile. It's a great stress management tool. Honestly, I would just suggest that you kind of go through and investigate these for yourself to see, one, if maybe there is a larger concern that you might want to speak to your physician about, but two, to also consider how you might be able to find ways to use sensory processing to help you as part of your mindfulness and self-regulation activities. Again, I would just suggest that you go through, look up each of the sensory processing systems, consider, what are some of the things that you really like, whether you're seeking those things, or what are some of the things that you don't like, whether you're avoiding those things. And then list the things that you seek and the things that you avoid for each of those categories. And then go back and look up activities that you can do under each of those 8 sensory systems to increase your level of awareness or arousal in order to have more energy to do things, and things that are calming to help you get ready for sleep or to recover from stress. Create that sensory profile, write it down, have your list with you, whether it's in your planner, your journal, your notebook, or multiple places, or on your phone, and have those things ready at hand. So when you are experiencing stressful days or stressful moments, or when you're trying to set up a morning or a nighttime routine, you have that list to visually look at. And even if you just pick 1 or 2 things, you can start integrating those things into your daily, weekly, monthly routine. And I guarantee you, it'll be a life changer. I have been doing this now for myself personally since 2018, so 7 years. And each year and every couple months, I change the activities, I update things. Probably the thing that you could look at the most and notice of what I do is, 1, my use of color, okay? Everybody knows that I love the color green, but there's a very specific reason why. And green, for instance, is one of those most neutral colors. And so for me, getting to green was a lot of progress, because before I was in such a level of fight or flight and constant stress and survival that I needed everything to be blue. And blue was like the most relaxing color, right? Like deep blue, like indigo blue. So I've been progressing. I went from blue to purple to green. And now I've been in green for a while, which is really great. It helps me focus, helps me do the things I need to do. It's also relaxing to a degree. But now I'm starting to be able to integrate some of those more alerting colors that I have always avoided. Yellows, oranges, red. Red is the most alerting. So the fact that I have, for instance, this red bag that I love and I carry, and it doesn't make me sick, and it doesn't make me like want to like run and go somewhere else, like is a really great sign for me, because again, I am very sensitive visually. Some of the other things that I've done that you might be able to notice outwardly are the types of workouts that I do. I am a proprioceptive seeking individual, so things like running, lifting weights, boxing, heavy work, harsh contact. That's what my body loves and needs to be regulated, but it's also really good for my posture, my position as a woman and as an individual with scoliosis and a bulging disc. But there's so many other things and topics of sensory processing that we could discuss. If there's anything specific you would like to know, or for instance, if you want me to share information about maybe a specific sensory system or to explain the use of color, I would be happy to do that. I'll talk to you in the comments below. And until then, I hope that you found this video helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.